never trust a British guy with a map and a pencil. I don't know Israel's endgame. That's what's kind of scary for me. Like, I can kind of see what Hamas thinks their endgame might be. I don't know what is the end state for the operation. Anytime you get into an operation, you don't know your end state, that's how you get something like Afghanistan. Israel is going to make the first battle of Fallujah, the Marine Corps engaged in Iraq, look like an episode of Teletubbies. But, you know, if you've been in combat, it's a lot harder to understand why people feel that way when you've seen death up close, when you've picked up body parts the size of chicken McNuggets. When you're 48 years old and your best friend is a bottle of liquor, you know, you won't feel so crazy about going after your enemies.
So this situation is moving pretty fast, and thanks for taking the time to do this literally kind of at the last minute. Hey, can you do a show tomorrow with no prep? So you're a champ for coming on, man.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Do you mind if I drink?
Go knock yourself out, man.
Cheers.
Preferably only after the show. I'm rehydrating and you're dehydrating. That works just fine for me. So a lot of people are going to say, who's this guy, who's this Yetz drinking during a podcast, and why is he an expert on the Arab-Israeli conflict? And you're not quite an Arab-Israeli conflict guy, but tell me why anyone in their right mind would pick Ryan McBeth to cover this particular incursion into Israel here with Hamas.
You know, I'm not exactly an Arab-Israeli conflict guy, but I do know a little bit about anti-armor warfare. I spent 20 years in the military on the Army side doing anti-tank and heavy weapons work. And I did a couple of deployments overseas. On the Kalamadabik Shwaya Shwaya, I speak a little Arabic. I talk like an Egyptian, which is better than walking like an Egyptian or driving
I knew that
like
was coming.
One.
Yeah.
and I eventually got a job working for Accenture Federal Services, doing something called C4ISR, which means Command, Control, Communications, Computers, Intelligence, Surveillance, Reconnaissance. So basically, I find bad guys. And then I find bad guys using computer technology. And once I found those bad guys, then I give that information to my client. My client can take action on that. So when the Ukraine war started, I knew a little bit about anti-armor warfare. I started a YouTube channel. I used to do programming content, software content, and I did a couple of videos on why tanks explode. And all of a sudden, people are interested in what I had to say about tanks. And we actually study a lot of the Arab-Israeli wars quite extensively in the military, because many of them are used as case studies for what works and what doesn't when it comes to armored warfare.
Yeah, the wars in the Middle East, especially the ones that involve Israel, have all been kind of the stuff of legends in many ways. Even it sort of depends what side you're on, of course, but you think about things like the 6-Day War. It's like, oh my gosh, all these countries are invading. Wait a minute, they all lost. What happened? You know, it's just like in these quick turnarounds. I don't know if that type of thing is possible these days. I mean, it's a completely different landscape with different military tech as well. But first, I want to caveat this podcast, by the way, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, good, Jordan's going to tell me who I should be rooting for in this conflict. Or Jordan better not say that he's on XYZ side of this conflict, or I'm going to unsubscribe. It's not a history podcast. We're not going to talk about who has a right to exist and where they have a right to exist. And Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but Arabs and Jews have been fighting in this area since the 40s, and then probably like millennia before that. There have been little wars here and there between various groups that may or may not have happened the way that they are written in whatever books or urban or oral legends that they have been told in or written in.
Yeah, roughly since 1948. For the most part, that area was under the control of the Ottoman Turks since, I believe, 1516. And it wasn't until World War I that the Arabs and Jews got together and fought with the British to expel the Ottoman Turks from that area of Palestine. And to get them to fight, essentially, the British government gave them a deal. They promised the Arabs, hey, if you fight for us, we'll give you Palestine when all this is over with. And they promised the Jews, hey, if you fight for us, we'll give you this area when everything's over with. So never trust a British guy with a map and a pencil.
Yeah, or a napkin and a pencil, as the case seems to have been with this particular deal. And the other part of this caveat is we're going to get a few things wrong. I mean, it's an out of the loop episode where the situation's developing really quickly, but also just with the historical stuff, I want to step in front of everybody who's going to say, well, actually, because we're going to get that from every side in this conflict. There's a saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. This is going to be like 2 Jews, 2 Muslims, 2 people on the right, 2 people on the left, 68,000 different opinions. And I don't really want to hear any of them.
And there's a couple of Christians and Druze in there as well.
Right. So. Yes. Yeah. In other groups that we're going to get well actually about in the email because we didn't mention them in the caveat. So let's dive into a brief recap of history, because a lot of folks are going to say, I just said it's not a historical podcast, but I want the modern history of, let's say, Hamas, because people will know that Israel was formed in the 40s, the late 40s, and that was the British mandate. The Palestinian, what was it
British
called?
Mandate Palestine. Yeah. British
Mandate Palestine. Right. So that sort of divided everything up in this very messy way, which started, quote unquote, air quotes, I guess, which air quotes started this conflict, sort of, but not really. But what about Hamas? Because people are asking me, wait a minute, what's Hamas? I've heard of Yasser Arafat. Is that Hamas? No, he's dead and also wasn't part of Hamas. Like, there's all kinds of different groups here that people don't really understand. And for many people, they've never heard of Hamas before Saturday.
Yeah, well, Hamas is actually an acronym. It actually bothers me a little bit when I don't see it all capitalized, but I guess it's colloquial now, like the word radar. Hamas actually stands for Haraka al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya, which essentially means the Islamic resistance.
Right. So now we see why they use this acronym, because it's hard to explain and it's long.
And that's why they use the acronym. So this essentially grew out of the Muslim Brotherhood movement, which actually grew out of Egypt. And the Muslim Brotherhood goes like all the way back to the I think it was 1924. And Muslim Brotherhood was always kind of a thorn in the side of the Egyptians. And around 1986, Hamas kind of appeared out of the Muslim Brotherhood in the Gaza Strip, which is this small piece of land that is on the southeastern coast of Israel. It's on the Mediterranean Sea, and it's roughly the size of Omaha, Nebraska. So you have quite a few people packed into this small area, and the size of Omaha, Nebraska. And there was in the first Intifada, I believe in 1987, where Palestinians rose up against the Israelis. And if you look at footage from back in the 80s, these were guys who would throw rocks at Israelis. Right? And it was mainly because living conditions weren't all that great. That was when we started to see some of the first suicide bombers. That was when we started to see people going into Israeli settlements. And the whole thing was a mess. And Israel was inside Gaza, and they were controlling checkpoints in Gaza. And it was, life wasn't very good if you were a Palestinian. Now, you didn't have a lot of rights and freedom of movement, and that was a problem. So it's understandable why people were upset that the Israeli military was in Gaza.
So they form in 1986 from the Muslim Brotherhood. And I remember hearing about the Muslim Brotherhood from the Tahrir Square Arab Spring overthrowing of Mubarak, because didn't the Muslim Brotherhood then come to power in Egypt? And people were kind of like, oh, wait a minute, this sounds theocratic and we were just secular. Is this any better? And then the military ... didn't like it and overthrew them. And that now here we are.
Yeah, that's so Hamas is an Islamic movement. And Palestinians are relatively secular, but one of the issues is that Hamas tries to enforce things like hijab on women. There are some people there that kind of believe in that women are meant to be at home, that they need to cover themselves when they go out. And it's not as bad as Iran, but it's not that great either. It's not great if you're LGBTQ. When you're living in the West Bank. I mean, there's horror stories there of guys who have to hide their identity or they get married, and then I guess we call it in America, just see other men on the down low. Um, it's not a good life living under that religious order. And in that particular religious order actually took power in, I believe, 2006, when they
In the Gaza Strip.
in the Gaza
Hamas
Strip.
took over.
Hamas took over
But this is an election,
in an
right?
election. In an election,
Yeah.
in a general election. It was Hamas versus Fatah, and Hamas got more votes. And over the next 5 days after they won, they just started murdering guys in Fatah. And
Fatah is Yasser Arafat, who's since passed, is Yasser Arafat's party. They were in control of what? The Palestinian Authority?
Palestinian Authority. Correct.
And that controlled Gaza and the West Bank back then?
That controlled Gaza and the West Bank, and since they've split. Essentially, it's a nation with in two areas, kind of like Burma and Pakistan.
Okay, so tell us what the West Bank is, because people have heard of that, and then I think right now are going, the West Bank? Wait, is that a bank of something? What is that?
The West Bank is on the left side of Jordan, and it's fairly close to Jerusalem. It's an area that's roughly the size of Delaware. And quite a few Palestinians either are living there or they fled there after the Israeli independence in 1948.
So when you think about where Palestinians live, they live in Israel. They live in other countries across the world, of course, diaspora. But they also live in the West Bank, which is the west bank of the Jordan River, which is why it's to the left of Jordan, as you put it, which I love that. Look, left, right, up, down, fine. We're looking at a map. And the Gaza Strip, which is where the incursion into Israel happened from this past weekend. And each one of those sections of what you might call Palestine, and even if you're not including Israel, what you might these areas where the Palestinians mostly live, they have two different governments, one of which is Hamas in the Gaza Strip, one of which is Fatah, or the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, who is not necessarily a part of this incursion, at least not yet, not publicly, as far as we know. Correct?
Yes, and occasionally you'll see rocket fire come from the West Bank. In a lot of ways, the Palestinian Authority, I believe a lot of their government workers, they haven't been paid in over a year, and they've been on strike. I'm trying to do this from memory, which is tough to do on the spot in the podcast. But a lot of these government employees in the West Bank have been, they haven't been paid. And so like trash hasn't been picked up in a year. So there's actually a huge problem in the West Bank right now with illegal trash dumps. People are just kind of making their own dumps, and they're getting into farmers' fields, and goats are eating stuff they shouldn't eat.
Oh,
And
man.
it's a real mess.
Yeah. So the West Bank and Gaza, for that matter, these are refugee camps, essentially. I mean, these are not, and not even essentially, they are refugee camps. A lot of people will say it's an open air prison. I've been to the Gaza Strip. This was in 2000, and it was rough. I mean, we're talking about a lot of incomplete houses that don't have any windows and just have like carpets over these huge places where there would normally be a wall, lots of piles of garbage, a lot of burning tires, a lot of just kids playing in garbage or with like old bike tires. And I remember I was staying with a Palestinian family, and their parents had worked for the Palestinian Authority, but they had Hezbollah flags all over their house. So I got kind of a quick lesson in, wait a minute, I thought your dad worked for the government. Actually, he hates the government. So he's kind of like this inside man for Hezbollah. What's that? And, we had a lot of conversations about that kind of stuff, and we'll get into some of that. But these are not nice places to live. And the Palestinians are generally not allowed to leave. There's plenty of exceptions. Many of them worked in Israel. A lot of times they'll send their kids to study abroad, depending on how privileged they are. But mostly you can't leave. And there's not adequate water supply. There's not a lot of electricity. So these people are living in pretty desperate conditions. And that, I think, again, I'm not trying to justify any violence here, but people are often asking me, why would they do this? Well, because there's no sense of upward mobility, freedom, or anything like that. So there's a lot of desperation in there.
Well,
and that's part of the problem.
If you don't feel that there's a lot of opportunity, and then someone hands you a gun and a headband and a uniform, now you're somebody. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of your friends are joining Hamas and you're not a member of Hamas, yeah, I just want to work in my dad's bakery. Come on, guys.
Right.
That you're going to be, when you're a young man and you think you're invincible. So I guarantee you, every single Hamas militant that entered Israel on Saturday, they thought they were going to be the ones that were left alive at the end, right? Like nobody ever thinks it's going to be them that gets killed. So I'm sure when you're 18 years old, when you're young and you feel indestructible, it's really easy to take that headband and take that rifle and go into Israel because your friends are all admiring what you're doing. But the end state is there's there's really no positive outcome to what happens after that, and I'm not sure what the end game is.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, and of course I still will. But this gives us an overview of what Hamas is. This gives us an overview of the Palestinian Authority, in brief, the West Bank and Gaza. But Hamas, by the way, of note, have they never allowed elections again since 2006? I believe that. I mean, I don't remember being able to find any other elections since they came to power.
I actually don't recall. That is a fairly political.
Right.
I'm pretty good
Literally.
at identifying tanks and weapons and talk all day about some of the tactics used. But you could be right about that. I actually don't recall hearing about this.
So I looked this up, and again, I could just be missing something. But as far as I can see, Hamas just simply did not allow any other elections in the Gaza Strip. Now, supposedly they maintain a wide support base. They did come to power by winning an election, like a majority vote. But their charter essentially says Israel must be pushed into the sea and doesn't have a right to exist. So it's not a government where Israel can go, okay, look, we'll turn the electricity back on again, and we're going to build some hospitals and some schools, and you guys calm down. That's not really sort of in their DNA. And you might think, but if they live there, don't they want to live in peace? And we'll get to why that's not necessarily going to be a possibility and why the people who live in the Gaza Strip aren't necessarily the ones who are making the decisions here. But can you tell us what happened on Saturday? Because I think a lot of people are going to go, okay, great, I know that something happened and it's all over the news, but what specifically did Hamas do and what is Israel doing in response?
Well, Hamas essentially launched a raid. And a raid is a military action where a unit enters and strikes an area and then withdraws from that area. And usually raids are designed to harass an enemy, accomplish some sort of sabotage objective, destroy points of key terrain, or destroy key military units. In this case, this raid was designed to cause terror, and the raid was designed to capture prisoners that could later be traded for some of the 4,500 or so Hamas prisoners that Israel is holding. What's special about this raid is its incredible complexity. This has been in the works for years. No doubt in my mind, this has been in the works for years. They had soldiers come over the land border. They had drones. Let me actually walk you through the whole plan of attack here. Drones took off, and some of these drones attacked Israeli sites, attacked Israeli tanks, attacked Israeli bunkers, or what are called OPLPs, observation posts, listening posts. They dropped grenades and weapons on these, just like we've seen in Ukraine. The next step, or the next phase of the operation, was actually breaking through the border fence, which was done with explosives or in some cases bulldozers. And militants ran through those gaps. They breached these gaps and they ran through. There was also sea insertions, so people took small boats and they inserted themselves above Gaza from the sea. They also used paragliders. This was actually unbelievable to see, because it takes roughly a month to learn how to fly a paraglider. So it is hard to believe that Israeli intelligence did not pick up on a bunch of people with a sudden interest in paragliding.
I wondered about that, right? Yeah. So they're flying around on these paragliders. And how do you train with that? Because you're not allowed to fly things from what I understand, in Gaza without permission and certainly not without being seen. And so it must look a little weird when it's like, yeah, we have a paragliding club and it's got a kind of a ridiculous number of members and they all got this hardware. Like, that's just a strange hobby for a bunch of people in a refugee camp to suddenly take up.
I don't
unnoticed.
know. I can say that maybe a likely scenario would be that some of these militants were trained in Iran and then brought over for the actual mission. That would make a lot of sense if they were trained in Iran. Maybe Lebanon, although Hezbollah, and which is a similar organization in southern Lebanon, and Hamas aren't
Similar to Hamas.
They're similar. They're not exactly friends, but they both have similar objectives. Hezbollah is Sunni Muslim, and Hamas is mainly Shia Muslim, which is weird that Iran is supporting Hamas because Iran is mostly Shia.
That's what I thought, because they also support Hezbollah, do they not?
Yes, they do. They do.
Yeah. So Iran is supporting both of these militant groups, even though they're not necessarily the same belief religiously, which to me, a lot of people online are saying, oh, religion this, religion that. Yes, okay, the cover is religion, but when you're talking about this kind of conflict, a lot of this is just down to practicality, in my opinion. A lot of this is Iran doesn't like the United States. It doesn't like peace in the Middle East because everybody else in the Middle East kind of hates Iran at this point. So when those countries get along, like Saudi Arabia, Israel, Egypt, Jordan, etc., that's bad for Iran. So they don't really care that the book they have is slightly different from the book the other guys have. This is more like, we just want to mess up the chessboard as much as possible because that buys us time. What do you think?
A lot of it's power. I mean, if Iran wants to flex its muscles, it doesn't necessarily have an expeditionary military, right? They can't necessarily send an aircraft carrier someplace to project power. But what they can do is they can fund terror. They can fund terrorist organizations, and those terrorist organizations can act as a proxy for Iran. And there are no shortage of men who want to feel special, right? And some Iranian guy comes to you and gives you the first paycheck, the first steady paycheck you've ever had in your life, and hands you a gun and gives you a headband and says, okay, you're in charge of these people. How special do you feel?
Mm-hmm.
You feel pretty darn special, right? And we've seen it work in the Donbass, where Russia rolls in and says to everybody, hey, you guys are ethnically Russian, right? Let me give you some money. We're going to start a militia. We're going to take over the town hall, right? So Iran knows how to play people. And Iran is kind of looking out for Iran. They want to be able to control, like you say, control that chessboard.
And that comes into play later on when people think, what was the end game here? What was the plan here? But I want to get back to the raid. We mentioned paragliders. We mentioned people taking fishing boats up the coast. The Israeli Navy used to blast those things out of the water. So what happened there, and what else happened in the raid? Because from what it looks like, and again, by the time this episode comes out, it's going to be outdated. But as we speak, there are Israeli special forces still fighting militants in Israel that have taken over schools, apartments, taken a bunch of hostages, are fighting from Israeli homes and apartment blocks. That's still happening.
Yes, and one of the things that kind of surprised me in analyzing some of the footage of the Hamas militants when they entered Israel is that I didn't see any first aid kits on their belt. I didn't see any armored vests with trauma plates, armored plate carriers, and I didn't see any water. None of these guys had canteens, water bottles, camelbacks, none of that. And that actually kind of leads me to believe that some of these guys didn't expect to go home. Now, it seems like, well, let me explain the purpose of the...
Sort of contradicts what you said earlier about them wanting to stay alive. But I'm curious where you're going with this.
So I believe there were two objectives. One objective was to cause terror. And I believe some of those people who were causing terror and going door to door, essentially pulling Israelis out of their homes or shooting Israelis in their homes, that was one objective. Another objective was a festival that was going on, where they just tried to shoot as many people as they could and then take away others as hostages. Some hit military outposts. I know that some vehicles were captured, but the Hamas didn't know how to use these vehicles. Mm-hmm. And they kind of had to abandon them in place. But what's interesting is that it seems like from the footage I watched, the people who were on the snatch teams, which are guys who are going to grab Israeli soldiers or Israeli civilians and bring them back, those guys were better equipped than the people who were just rolling into houses. So just the fact that they don't have any water on them leads me to believe that a lot of these militants did not expect that they were going to be coming back, or they would.
Interesting. So there's maybe two different types, right? The guys who are just instructed to kill as many people until they get killed, and the other guys who are instructed to grab as many hostages as they can transport effectively and then go back to Gaza.
That's certainly what it seems like. What I haven't seen are any anti-tank missiles. Like, they didn't bring any heavy weapons with them. There are some mortars that Hamas uses. They use 120 millimeter mortars and 81 millimeter mortars that have been supplied by Iran. Those might come into play when Israel actually enters Gaza with their reserve forces. That might get kind of bloody, because you figure that the plan is most likely, or the end state for the operation is, this is what I believe, the end state for the operation is the Hamas forces Israel to enter Gaza to rescue these prisoners. They want civilians to be killed, and they want the world to see Palestinian civilians being killed. The world forces a ceasefire onto Israel. They force Israel to leave Gaza. And some of these prisoners remain behind, and they're held for years, and they're used as bargaining chips for Hamas soldiers that were captured. So I think that's kind of the end state, that Hamas believes that if they perform this operation, they'll have 2 weeks before the world says, okay, that's enough. Because Israel is going to make the first battle of Fallujah, the Marine Corps engaged in Iraq, look like an episode of Teletubbies. Israel knows what they're doing. They know how to fight in an urban environment. They have a fairly good army. They have reservists who are motivated. They have good equipment. They have night vision. They have body armor. They have first aid kits. They have water. They know how to supply their troops. And what's coming is nothing that Hamas can even comprehend. I think that maybe some of these younger guys who were given the gun and the headband were sold a bill of goods here. You know, you're going to be a hero, and it's really easy to be a hero when you're running through the breach that you just made.
Right, the hole in the fence.
It's a lot harder to be a hero when a Merkava is bearing down on you. Your buddies are dead. There's bullets flying in the air. At that point, all you're going to want is to not be there.
Merkava's the Israeli tank.
Merkava, the Merkava 4 is Israel's premier tank. And this vehicle, one kind of interesting feature on this vehicle is that it has what's called an active protection system. So this vehicle can actually shoot down rockets that are headed toward it.
Wow.
And so does the Namers, which is Israel's main armored personnel carrier that they use for their active duty forces. I think what is interesting is if Hamas is going to use drones dropping armor-piercing grenades on top of those tanks, that's going to totally negate the active protection system. And that's something we saw in Ukraine, although I don't believe any vehicles in Ukraine, even the Russian ones, have an active protection system.
It'll be interesting to see how this happens with the drone warfare. I mean, the Israelis are probably also very good at electronic warfare. That's just a guess from me, though. What do you think?
Yes. They have some of the best signals intelligence in the world, which is one of the weird things. Like, again, why didn't they see this coming? They have some great signals intelligence. I would not be so. I know Israel cut off water. They cut off electricity. Sooner or later, those cell towers. Now, odds are that Hamas is using radios. They're using runners, and they're going to be using cell phones as a backup source, as a secondary means of communication in order to execute attacks or prepare a defense. When you're in the dark and you're not getting orders from anybody, it's going to be absolute chaos with Hamas. Now, odds are that they have probably been briefed, like, hey, go to this safe house and fight. And when you can't fight anymore, you run out of ammunition, go to the safe house down the block. They probably practiced that. They probably know the first two safe houses and fighting positions to fight from. Hamas's leadership probably doesn't believe that some of these militants who are going to be fighting Israel are going to live any longer than the second safe house. But if they do last longer than that second safe house, now what do? So they've probably got about 3 days, 4 days of effective defense, effective urban defense. I also don't know what they're going to do with their wounded, how they're going to treat their wounded, or whether there's even a plan to Kazovac their wounded, or whether they're just going to rely on the Israeli army to treat their wounded, which is actually something the Taliban used to do. You know, the Taliban used to try to fight their way to the Americans so they wouldn't have to surrender to the Afghan army, because they knew the Americans would treat them better. So it's certainly possible that that some of Hamas's leadership might think like, all right, well, if these guys get wounded, you know, hopefully the Israelis will take care of them, or there's the other option, they just don't care.
Yeah, they just don't care. And a lot of people are probably wondering, how on earth did this kind of decision get made? You hinted at it before that they want to instigate retaliation so they can get propaganda videos of Israel blasting huge groups of people and Hamas is known to use human shields, not just Israelis, but their own people as well. I know that people don't like it when people say things like that, but it is true. There's a lot of documentation on this. They store a lot of missiles and weapons in hospitals and schools and things like that, and they use human shields. It's an effort to get Israel to kill civilians. Not that maybe they need to be egged on too much to do that, but at least they try not to blow up huge numbers of civilians from what it seems like. Then again, I've been wrong about that, and I know people are going to get angry that I even said that. But I think in many ways, Hamas wants as many dead Palestinians as possible. And I mean that because that does well for them. And Hamas's leadership, people don't know this, and I had to look this up to verify it. Hamas's leadership is in Qatar. They're not in Gaza. They're not going to get blown up. They're in their villa swimming in the pool, taking calls.
Yeah. Well, here's the other issue. If you take a look at, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but if you take a look at the IRA or some of the Ulster Defense Forces, at some point, when are you a freedom fighter and when are you a freedom fighter or a militiaman and when are you a gangster, right? There's a reason why my family isn't in Northern Ireland anymore, right? And so if you're a member of Hamas and you roll into a hospital and you say to the hospital administrator, listen, we're going to put some rockets in your basement. What do you say as a hospital administrator? Even if you don't like Hamas,
you don't have a choice.
You don't have what choice do you have? You're not fighting back, right? It's tough to fight back against gangsters and thugs, right? Now, Israel, they try their best to minimize civilian casualties. One of their tactics is something called roof knocking. And roof knocking is where they'll, if they decide they're going to destroy a building, from what I understand, they'll call people in the building. They know their phone numbers. They'll call people, say, hey, get out of the building. We're going to bomb it in 10 minutes. And then they drop a small bomb on top of the building. And this bomb doesn't destroy the building. It just hits the roof and explodes. And it doesn't go through the roof. It just lets everybody know you got 10 minutes to get out of this building. And then after everybody's out of the building, or in 10 minutes, they take down that building. So, yeah, they
Does Hamas let the civilians evacuate those buildings?
They're probably leaving as well.
Mm-hmm.
You can be a shaheed if you want to be to a missile, but that's not going to get you remembered as it would if you when push comes to shove. Like I said, everybody thinks they're going to be a hero, but when bullets are flying by your head, I know that I personally don't like the idea of dying inside of a concrete building. And you could say, does Hamas let people leave? They probably want to get out of that area too, right? I don't want to die in a collapse. I think I would rather, if I have to, fight an enemy tank, right? I don't want to, be close to that building. So,
no, that completely makes sense. I'm sure there's ways around this if necessary. I was just curious if that was a thing, keeping civilians and other folks inside infrastructure to essentially create more casualties, right? Because again, Hamas's game plan on this was so confusing because I thought, okay, how are you going to attack Israel when they have Benjamin Netanyahu, which is by all accounts pretty right wing, in Israel, and is ex-military special forces, right? And is a guy whose brother got killed fighting the Palestinians in his special forces capacity as well. It's like, this is a guy who's probably been itching for a while to do something and is now empowered to do that, and now has moral license from the rest of the free world to go and do something, like you said, for 2 weeks. I think Israel's got a long memory. I don't think it's going to be over in 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks they start getting calls to slow down, which they ignore for 2 to 3 or even more weeks. It depends. I mean, I remember watching the invasion of Lebanon 20 years ago or so, and that lasted longer than 2 weeks, and that wasn't nearly the provocation. That was about rockets hitting kibbutzes, essentially farms, among other things. This is way, way worse. I mean, this is almost like September 11th for Israel.
Yeah, and what did we do after September 11th? We lost.
We were not
minds.
out in 2 weeks. We lost our minds. Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for checking out this entire episode on YouTube. If you want to follow up on this topic, check out our podcast feed or visit us on our website at jordanharbinger.com, where you can learn more about our guest and dive even deeper into what we discussed today. And remember, YouTube is not the only place that you can check out The Jordan Harbinger Show. Any podcast app should have us. Check out the links in the description, where you will find access to our shows that don't appear on YouTube, like Skeptical Sunday, where we debunk topics like crystal healing, GMOs, conspiracy theories, homeopathy, tipping, even lawns, to find out if they're backed by science and logic, or if they're just complete nonsense. Spoiler, many of them are complete nonsense. Also, our Feedback Friday shows, where we help people escape from cults, get raises at work, and take all manner of questions from you, the audience, all the way down to the bottom of the barrel. And every episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show has something useful you can take away and apply in your own life, and help you navigate what I know can often seem like the overwhelming and paralyzing challenges of modern life. Life can be hard, yes, but we are here to help. And if you appreciate how we help, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.
So if you've seen some of the footage of Israeli reservists boarding their vehicles, and their families are seeing them off, and people are cheering and waving flags, that's all well and good when you're getting on that vehicle and people are throwing you candy. You're going to want to be back there in a couple of days when you just stuck your hand into your friend's face, and it's a pile of goo, right?
Yeah. That is true. That is true. Although, man, talking to Israelis now, a lot of people, it's such a small country that almost everybody I've talked to there knows somebody who's been personally impacted. So it's like, hey, is your family okay? Yes, immediate family, but our family doctor's son is missing.
Yeah, it's like 9/11.
And he lives in Ashkelon.
Everybody had someone in the Pentagon or in the Twin Towers. They knew someone who was somewhere on that day. And Israel's a lot smaller. A lot smaller. And everybody serves in, well, most people, if you're ultra-Orthodox, you don't have to serve, but everybody serves in the military. And it's a very interesting, it's a very unique military because it's conscription, but it's almost more like jury duty. Israel doesn't really pay their conscripts all that well. I think it's about 350 to 1,000 shekels a month, which works out to like $100 to $350 roughly. Yeah, they actually call it cigarette money, from what I understand.
Yeah, they do smoke a lot.
They do,
or a little, depending on how much they get paid. Yeah, but you're right. It's like jury duty. That's a great way to put it. You'll meet people who are in the Israeli army, and you're like, how's the army? Oh, it's great, man. I'm hooking up with a different girl every night, and I'm drinking all this. And it's like, don't you have to, I don't know, get up and go shooting or something? Sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of there. We'll handle it.
Yeah,
right?
It'll be fine. Yeah, there's a lot of it. I mean, I'm sure they have basic training, but a lot of it is kind of like, I go home every weekend to have dinner with my mom. It's like, but you're in the military? Well, yeah, but I'm 30 minutes away from home.
From what I understand, the reason Israel does that is that, number one, they want their kids to have a connection with their parents, and the parents served in the military as well, most likely. Mm-hmm. But also, they don't want to feed them.
Yeah,
and that's why you see soldiers hitchhiking on the side of the road with a rifle, because they're trying to get home for Shabbat.
That's true. I forgot about that. Man, we picked up a lot of hitchhikers when we were in Israel. And I was on a bus. And I remember some of the other people being like, I'm not comfortable with us picking up random dudes carrying automatic weapons. And I'm like, well, you are in the wrong place because these are all 20-year-old, 19-year-old kids. And we're picking up 20 of them because we have 20 free seats and we are taking all of them as far as we can. And it was a tour group with a bunch of American college kids. And they were just like, I don't know. My mom would not like this. And it's like, call your mom and ask if she's okay with the IDF. And it was like, oh my gosh, you're with soldiers on the bus. How romantic. It was really an exception to every rule. So, okay, you brought this up a little bit earlier. Why didn't world-famous Israeli surveillance and intelligence capabilities see this coming? I mean, you have Israel being superhuman, legendary level human intelligence, spy operations, black ops of all kinds, military operations, surveillance and technology, the Iron Dome. I mean, when you think of Israeli capability, you think of innovation, you think of the best spies in the world, stealing nuclear secrets from everybody, the United States included. I mean, this is like such an epic failure. It's almost impossible to believe that they got away with it. It's even worse than September 11th in many ways in terms of an intelligence failure, because September 11th was civilian stuff being commandeered by hijackers overseas to crash into towers. This is, we got paragliders, thousands of rockets, military vehicles and equipment, and hundreds or even thousands of fighters, and nobody saw it coming. And boats. I mean, it's ridiculous how much they missed.
Well, I think you answered your own question. So let's say you're, I've worked in the intelligence community, right? And how about I go to my boss with that? Imagine you're a junior intel analyst, and you go up to your boss and you say, hey, I just got this intercept that it looks like they're planning a raid with paragliders, boats, drones, thousands of people coming over the border. How fast are you going to get shunted to the desk where you're inspecting text messages, right? Like, I think that could have been the case where they saw the intelligence and they're like, nah.
Too much. Too daring.
It sounds like a James Bond novel.
Yeah, it does.
This sounds like something you'd see in a James Bond novel. This level of boldness, right? So I could easily see someone taking a look at this intelligence. I'm sure they're going to have an equivalent of the 9/11 Commission that kind of looks into where the failures were. It could also be siloed communication, where one group is going like, wow, why are these guys buying paragliders? And another group is going, wow, how come these guys are storing these front-end loaders near this other place over here? So it could be siloed communications, and we might see something similar to an Israeli Department of Homeland Security after this, where people can get together and they can share intelligence. But actually, I vote for the boldness of the plan. They might have known about this plan and discounted it as just something that was too bold and just too hard to actually organize.
I mentioned, we saw in the news before that people were saying things like Iran doesn't want Israel and Saudi Arabia to negotiate peace because, of course, if Israel and Saudi Arabia are no longer at odds with one another, they can turn their focus to Iran because Israel already has peace treaties with Egypt, Jordan, things like that. So these big players in the area, Iran is better off when they are all infighting, not when they say, hey, we can trade with Israel and all make money and forget about this. Iran doesn't want that. And many people postulate, okay, Iran got Hamas to do this because it rocks the boat so much it's going to derail the Saudi peace process. I don't think that's going to work. I think MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the leader of Saudi Arabia for all intents and purposes, and Saudi Arabia, he wants to cement power. He wants to make money. He wants to get a defense agreement with the United States, which is the carrot in this particular equation. This seems like a speed bump, if that. And I've also heard you say that you don't buy that justification either. Tell me about that.
I don't. So you really need to have Peter Zion on your show.
He's been on a few times, yeah.
So he could probably he's way better at answering questions like that. Iran doesn't need an excuse. Let me rephrase that. The government of Iran doesn't need an excuse. It is incredible how many Iranian fans that I have. and I love
Yeah,
them.
we have a ton of Iranian listeners. They know I'm not talking about them.
I
They know
love
they
them
live in
all.
a theocracy. They're in the streets protesting that all the time.
It's, there was a kid who wrote me. They have Apple stores in Iran.
I did not know they had Apple stores in Iran. How is that? They're not
They
sanctioned?
don't. They're not sanctioned. Essentially,
Wow.
and this kind of blew my mind. This Iranian kid, he's a fan of my show, and he wrote me and he said, Ryan, how I'm thinking about going to school for computer science. Should I buy a Mac? Should I buy a PC? And that's when I learned that Iran has these Apple stores that actually people will go to Turkey, they'll go to Qatar, they'll buy Macintoshes, they'll bring them back, they'll sell them, at a steep price increase,
Profit.
at a steep profit inside something that looks like an Apple store that isn't
So it's a
sanctioned by
fake Apple
Apple.
store.
It's a fake Apple store. And when you have people like that, people who want to live the American dream, and like inside every Iranian is an American wanting to get out. Yeah, Iranian people are great. The Iranian government, on the other hand, I think they want to wield that stick, right? So I think you're right in the sense that I don't really see this being a targeted effort toward a peace process with Saudi Arabia, because I think this is probably in the works for years. Probably at least 2 years. And people have said, Russia gave permission, or Russia helped fund this. Wagner helped train the Palestinians. Look, Russia can do bad all by itself. Right? It doesn't. They don't need. We don't need to make stuff up about Russia, right? So when you look at the idea of Wagner coming in, what the heck is Wagner for? You have Iranian trainers. They work perfectly well. They know what they're doing. They know how to train people on weapons, small unit tactics. You don't need Wagner, right? Why would you have that additional expense? So I don't see this as being something that was trying to derail the peace process. It might have been convenient to execute at this particular time, but also it was Sukkot. It was the end of the Jewish holiday of Sukkot, which is celebrating the harvest, kind of thing. And marks the end of all the Israeli holidays. And it just might have been a convenient time to execute the attack. Yeah.
What is going to happen from here? You mentioned that the Israeli response is going to make, what was the way you put it?
It's going to make Fallujah look like an episode of Teletubbies.
Right. Yeah. So what does that entail? I mean, we're just trying to predict the future here, but what does that entail?
It's going to entail clear hold build. So essentially, these Israeli forces are going to go block by block. They're going to, and it's going to be tough fighting, and a lot of people are going to get killed. My rough guess is they're probably going to sustain about 6% casualties per day. That doesn't necessarily mean killed. That's going to be wounded as well. They're going to have to go block by block. They're going to have to clear the house. They're going to have to mark the house as cleared. They're going to have to move on to the next house. And they're going to continue to do this with some of those Merkava tanks and some of the Nemur APCs in support. And it's going to be rough going. They're going to get 200, 300, 500 meters a day, house and house and house. So that's probably what it's going to look like. If they run into a machine gun nest, or they run into a bunker, or they run into anti-armor weapons, Hamas should have, I'm pretty sure they have the Rod, which is a copy of the Russian Sagar, which is an anti-tank missile, a wire-guided anti-tank missile, the AT-3 Sagar. They should also have the Concours, which is a Russian, at least a copy of a Russian anti-tank missile. And some of them might have the Coronet, which is a pretty good Russian anti-tank missile as well. I know that Hezbollah has used the Coronet in Lebanon to attack tanks and even some civilian vehicles. So if they encounter an anti-armor position, odds are they're not going to assault it unless they're pressed for time. They're going to call an Apache helicopter, of which Israel has quite a few, or they're going to call a JDAM strike directly on that building.
What's a JDAM? Is that like a surface-to-surface missile?
It is an air-to-surface missile. JDAM stands for Joint Direct Attack Munition. It is a GPS-guided bomb. Israel also has these weapons called dime bombs, which means dense inert explosive metal, or dense inert metal explosive. Essentially, it's you take a bunch of. Have you ever heard of frangible ammunition?
Mm-mm.
All right,
But I
so
know what that would mean, I
okay,
suppose.
yeah. So frangible ammunition might be something that when it hits drywall, it just kind of explodes in a puff of copper, right? So dime bombs are essentially metal that are pressed down into a dense core, and then when that bomb explodes, there's not any shrapnel. What you have is this dense metal moving out at supersonic speeds. So if you're very close to the bomb, you're going to have a bad day. If you're further away, since the metal will slow down a lot faster, it's going to cause fewer civilian casualties. So they might be using these. Now, one of the problems with dime bombs is that they don't have shrapnel that you can detect on an X-ray. So just imagine thousands of particles of metal embedded in your body, right?
Oof.
That's not going to be good for you, right?
No.
But ideally, the shrapnel doesn't fly as far as the metal does, so it is a way to reduce casualties. Although if you're in the wounding zone, you're not going to have a good day. So odds are we're going to see.
Terrible.
Yeah. Well,
it's terrible. It's always the civilians who pay the price for this crap, right? We got Hamas leadership, like I said, by the pool, taking calls in Qatar. You've got a lot of the fighters who are dead, or they're going to have safe houses, or they're going to evac, or they're going to disappear into the civilian population. And you're just going to have a bunch of dead Palestinians as a result, and Israelis who are now going to go in. Do you think they'll set up some sort of DMZ type buffer zone? I mean, it seems like if they blew a hole in the fence, you can try to make this fence and wall a lot stronger, or you can say, okay, we're going to cut half a mile of your territory, and we're going to create a giant minefield with a bajillion checkpoints that you can't get through with motorcycles and vehicles. And yeah, all the people that used to live there, I don't know, but we're knocking those buildings down, and oh, that hospital and school that was there, oh well, guess you got to rebuild it somewhere else. I mean, that seems like I hate to use the word reasonable strategy, but it seems like a reasonable strategy for trying to prevent something like this happening again.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure whether Israel has signed the landmine treaty. I know that I'm pretty sure that the border around Gaza is not mined. One of the things that the Palestinians got very good at is tunneling. There are tunnels. That's actually one method of insertion that I didn't mention. There's actually tunnels underneath Gaza, so if you might make the tunnel longer, that might be a possibility. I could see them, and Israel has a term, they call it D9ing. We're just going to D9 this whole area. And a D9 is a Caterpillar bulldozer. So they could just D9 all the houses in a 3-kilometer area by the border and just tell everybody, sorry, you got to move back. Minefield, I don't really see them doing that.
They haven't signed the landmine treaty. They haven't signed the landmine treaty. Okay. They have not. No. Along with the U.S., Israel, the U.S., Russia, China, etc. But I ask this because I've been to the North Korean, and the North and South Korean DMZ, and that thing is, it's a massive minefield. Depending on when you go there, sometimes those mines explode because there'll be like a brush fire that just starts, or an animal will get in there and set off a super old mine, and it just blows up and burns everything around it. And I was just thinking, yes, they can tunnel, but if you're putting seismic detector devices around there along with landmines so people don't go and tamper with them, and you've got the whole thing observed and it's a shoot to kill zone, it's harder to then blast a hole in the fence and ride through with motorcycles.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is a possibility. That might be something that they're going to have to consider. I don't know Israel's endgame. That's what's kind of scary.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah.
Like, I can kind of see what Hamas thinks their endgame might be. I don't know what is the end state for the operation. Anytime you get into an operation, you don't know your end state. That's how you get something like Afghanistan, right?
Yes.
What's our end state? And for Hamas, I know their end state. Their end state is world opinion comes down on Israel. A lot of people are killed. Israel leaves. That's their ideal end state. And they have some hostages they can trade. I don't know Israel's end state, because you can't, ideally you go house to house and you either kill or you arrest every single member of Hamas. Now, I can't necessarily tell if somebody is a member of Hamas. I don't know if they issue ID cards. So the guy can take off his headband, throw the weapon in the backyard and say, no, I go to university.
Right.
So is he a member of Hamas? Is he not? I mean, you can't just arrest every single military age male.
I was going to say, they can just say, you know what, we're going to arrest every military-age male and see what happens, and then trade them for the Israelis that have been taken, Hamas or not.
That could be something that Israel could do. And I think
Yeah.
that would be fairly effective. Now, what would be interesting is I think it was in 2002. And I remember reading about this. Hamas gave permission for women to jihad. So,
Yeah.
if you see a situation where women are picking up arms and women are fighting, or women become suicide bombers, now what do you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is a very scary and horrible kind of no-win situation for every single party on every single side. Do you think other countries will enter the war? I mean, Syria, Lebanon via Hezbollah, Jordan, Egypt. I mean, Jordan and Egypt have treaties with Israel, so I'm going to go ahead and cross those off the list unless you disagree. But what about Lebanon via proxy Hezbollah, Iran's proxy Hezbollah, or Syria?
I don't know. That's an interesting question. And so there's one of the things that I talk about. I talk about in videos is that there's 4 different kinds of militaries. Right? You have expeditionary militaries. It's basically the United States, France, Great Britain, to a lesser extent Russia. China is trying to develop an expeditionary military. You also have self-defense militaries. Most of the armies of Europe are self-defense militaries. You have internal security militaries. Most of the militaries inside of South America, those are internal security militaries. And then you have what are called palace guard militaries. And that is most of the armies of the Middle East, maybe with an exception of Iraq and Iran to an extent. And Turkey is an Arab. Turkey has a self-defense NATO standard military. So they don't have a palace guard military. So if you are the leader of an Arab country, you kind of want your forces in your country protecting your own kingdom. You don't necessarily want to send them overseas. And the other problem is that you might send them overseas, but how do you feed them? How do you supply them? What are the logistics? It's really easy to say, oh, well, what if this country enters the war? All right, well, how do they get the troops over there? How do they feed the troops once they're there? How do they get ammunition? I could see Hezbollah attacking Israel from the north and opening up a second front because the supply lines are fairly short. And in a lot of ways, I think the government of Lebanon might welcome that because essentially the army and Hezbollah are at parity, right? Mm-hmm. So, I don't think the army of Lebanon would mind if a couple of Hezbollah guys got killed. The Israelis did it for them. Then maybe the Lebanese army could actually regain control of the southern part of their country, right? That would be. I've met Lebanese officers before who were in American training classes, and they are some of the hardest working guys I've ever met. And they want their country to be a paradise again, right?
Yeah. I'd love to visit Lebanon, but not right now.
Yeah. So when you look at the idea of other countries entering the war, what are the logistical capabilities of those countries?
That's a good question I hadn't thought of. Yeah, it's real easy to go, we're going to declare war against Israel. Cool. Well, you're never going to. Thanks, Fiji. You're out of the running, though. No offense to Fiji. I'm sure they're great.
Fiji has 3 infantry battalions, and they mainly do peacekeeping duties with the United Nations. And these guys will serve time in Lebanon, where they act as peacekeepers, and they'll serve time in the Sinai Peninsula. That's where I met with the Fijians, and they'll spend time at home. So essentially, Fiji has a reserve force, and these guys are activated. They do a tour, they come home.
Interesting. Well, I had no idea, and I that was a bad example then, because what I was thinking is Syria, who's a little bit busy right now, and Jordan and Egypt are already crossed off the list. And by the way, you say Hezbollah, I say Hezbollah. Is that correct? Because I felt like I put the emphasis on the wrong syllable there, but you said it the same way that I did.
Hezbollah,
so what happens?
Look, like I said, I talk like an Egyptian, and I'm also from New Jersey, so English isn't my first language.
Got it. Because other people are going to write in and go, Hezbollah. It's Hezbollah, not Hezbollah, but I don't know what it is now. Now I'm totally confused.
When you say the word for God, you say Allah. So, Hezbollah is literally the party of God. Hezbollah.
Ah, okay. Well, I'm sticking with it then, regardless of the flack I'm getting. Get on. Do you think Mossad goes after Hamas leadership in Qatar? Do you think that's a thing? Israel likes to do that kind of stuff, right? They like to show up and be like, we're just going to poison these 3 guys with something horrible.
I think that might get a little more kinetic, and it might happen 10 years from now.
Yes,
I've
I think
actually
so.
read a book about the Mossad. It was called By Way of Deception, and Israel
Yeah,
is
great
pretty
book.
darn good at that. That honestly, if they were going to do something like that, why wait, right? I mean, everybody wants to be the king, right? Until the king starts getting axed,
Yeah,
right?
whacked.
Getting
Yeah,
whacked.
I really, I mean, I'm sure the Hamas leadership in Qatar, I jokingly said by the pool taking calls. They're probably not by their own pool taking calls. They're probably checked in somewhere a little bit more secure because they have to know that Mossad is now, who I assume also watched them leave their place and go somewhere else, which is going to be one of those intelligence failures that they find when they do the investigation. Like, we noticed the top three Hamas officials all left and went on vacation the same week and tried to disappear, and we found them over here, but we didn't think that was a weird coincidence. That's going to be one of those things, right?
Well, that's kind of where
I
I come
predict.
in. That's C4ISR. That's how you use software. You go like,
I
wait a
see.
minute, look, someone from China goes to South America, and then 6 months later, all of a sudden, there's an increase in the price of palladium, right? And it's because China bought up a mine and shut the mine down because they want to increase the prices of all their other mines. Well, that's C4ISR, right? That's command control communications, intelligence surveillance reconnaissance, using software to figure out what the bad guys are doing. So I would not be
Interesting.
surprised if at some point they saw the bad guys leave, and 6 months ago the bad guys were going to a lot of meetings, all the chatter. And I'm sure you've heard the term intelligence chatter.
Yes. Yeah.
That just means that, hey, these guys are using their phones more, they're communicating more, they're planning something. That's chatter, right? So they might have seen an increase in chatter 6 months ago. You probably saw an increase. I wouldn't be surprised if this took about 18 months to plan. That's why I don't think Russia was involved at all, because 18 months ago we were in Iran. Russia was just invading Ukraine, and this wasn't really kind of on their radar screen. I don't think Vladimir Putin said, "Hey, 18 months from now, 2 years from now, we're going to be stuck in Ukraine." So
Right.
let's have this other war, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I would also imagine that if you want to keep something secret from the world's top intelligence service, the fewer parties involved, the better. Maybe don't have Wagner and Russia, whose communications are constantly being penetrated by the NSA and the CIA at all times. You probably don't really want that kind of chatter in there. I mean, I would imagine this was quite tightly controlled between Iranian intelligence and Hamas.
I would not have been surprised if each of the cells that were involved didn't know that other cells existed. So typically,
So the paraglider attackers, the motorcycle attackers, the other they just all had no idea. They all
no
thought they were
idea.
the only plan.
They probably they thought they were the only plan. I think that's the only way you can get something like this to work, right? Because everyone thought they were doing their own thing. It was going to be a suicide mission. They were roll in, do their thing, maybe get killed, maybe they were going to come back. The people that were snatching guys, they might have had a bigger picture as to what was going on, based on their equipment and so on. But
Yeah, but also maybe not. Maybe they thought they were going to kidnap a few dozen Israelis and come back, and that was going to be the end of it. Who knows? Do you think Israel bombed something in Iran for their role in this mess?
That's tough to do, because in order to do that, you're going to have to violate the sovereign airspace of a number of nations.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to fly over.
But they've done it before.
They attacked Iraq in 1982, the Osric reactor that was bombed with F-16s. I don't believe Israel's ever directly attacked Iran. The only way they could do it is if Saudi Arabia gave it a wink and a nod, and Israel ferried their planes. Because remember, when you're dealing with a fighter jet, F-16, F-15, F-35, which are the three main fighter jets that Israel has, for every pound of fuel that you carry, that's one less pound of bomb you can carry, right? And if you're going to go into Iran, you're going to have SEAD, or suppression of enemy air defenses. So you need to carry anti-radar missiles with you to take out their radar before you start hitting installations. You're going to have to carry planes that do anti-air work. So you're going to have to take care of their radar, take care of the surface-to-air missiles, take care of their fighter planes. About the only way you could do it is if you sent a bunch of planes to Saudi Arabia and you used that as a staging area. And the Saudis...
Yeah, that is going to be tough.
And the Saudis were like, hey, let's do this together.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, I've often said that if Iran ever develops a nuclear weapon, I'm not too concerned about them shooting it at Jerusalem. I'm kind of concerned about them shooting it at Saudi Arabia, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like let's get rid of the Sunnis and then we can run the whole Middle East.
So I mean, it is possible that Saudi gives the wink and the nod to Israel to do that. I mean, Saudi and Iran are bitter enemies. I know that Israel had attacked Iran before, but I think it was there was a cyber attack, and then I think there was an attack launched from inside Iran that was later blamed on Israel, some sort of drone thing. I think this was a couple of years ago.
I do recall that. That was I do recall there was a drone attack. I actually believe that came from some of the Kurdish-controlled areas of Iraq. So that could happen. Something like that, a drone attack against Iran. Iran does not like the Kurds all that much. I don't know why. The Kurds seem to be great people to me, but it seems like everybody in the Middle East, Turkey, Iraqis, Iranians, a lot of these guys don't like the Kurds. So I could
they fight well and they want their own country that has a piece of each one of those countries. So I understand it, but God bless the Kurds, man. Those are some brave people who have taken, like you think the Jews have taken some shit through history. You haven't met the Kurds. My God.
Yeah. And I've talked with Iranians, guys who I was assisting, when Mossad Amini was murdered and people were protesting. I talk with these guys. I think I mentioned the Kurds. It's like I flipped a switch. A lot of these Iranians were talking about the Kurds. Like, oh, whoa, okay. I didn't mean to go there. It was like sitting down with your racist uncle. Like, whoa, okay, you just said that.
Yeah, I have also experienced that. You don't admire anything Kurdish in front of anybody who's not Kurdish and also from the Middle East, because they will not turn it off.
I can see that.
It's a thing.
I can see a drone attack coming from. Coming from Kurdish-held areas. That could be a possibility. A fighter attack, man, that's a lot of refueling.
It is. I know Israel has threatened this before, though. Ryan, they've said things like, this is a red line, and if the United States doesn't do anything, we're going to go blow up, what was it, Natanz or something?
Dude, you can say anything you want. How many tankers do you have?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
True. Like, yeah,
I think Israel has 4 tankers. And then you got to get them there. And then what do you do for SAR? What do you do for search and rescue if one of these Israeli pilots gets shot down? Right? Like you can talk a great game. I have no doubt in my mind the Israeli Air Force has a plan, but I don't see how they can execute that plan without flying over a sovereign nation like Iraq, like Syria, Saudi Arabia. And then they have to fight their way through Iranian defenses, fight their way through Iranian fighters, launch their attacks, and then go home. Now, if you had an American aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf, which I believe we do have a carrier there right now, that could be an issue. Right? Like we could shut that down pretty darn quick.
Is that we don't have the Nimitz over there?
I actually don't recall what carrier.
Oh no, sorry,
there.
That left in 2020. Never mind.
There is a carrier. I believe there's a carrier in the area. I know there's one in the Med. I think that's a Gerald R. Ford. I could have sworn there is a carrier in the Arabian Sea. And I know that Marines are guarding ships. The Marines and the Navy are guarding ships in the Strait of Hormuz. Because Iran, once in a while, they just like to take over ships and hold people hostage. And you violated our border by 2 inches. So actually, if there is a amphibious assault
ship, the USS Bataan is to the Gulf. It has stealth F-35 fighters and other warplanes. So yeah, okay.
So
so we do have stuff there.
Yeah,
which doesn't surprise me.
I think. Again, I'm pulling this out of my head. They probably have a squadron of F-35. So we're talking maybe 12-ish planes of Marine Corps F-35Bs. And that can be a problem. That can be a heck of a problem. F-35, a couple of F-35Bs, some Tomahawk missiles, that'll ruin Iranian air defense's day. And
Although the U.S. stepping in directly to fight with Iran because of this is, I'd like to say it's far-fetched and unlikely, but I guess you just don't know.
I
You
don't
just
know,
don't
and I
know.
hope it doesn't, because, like I said, I have
Yeah.
a lot of Iranian fans, and I love all of them. And some kid's dad is working at a factory. Some kid's dad is working at an oil refinery. Wrong place,
Yep.
wrong time. That's not what I want to see.
Any final thoughts on this Hamas-Israel conflict? I know by the time this comes out, this is all going to be up in the air. But I think hopefully some of our predictions still hold water. The ones that involve the least amount of death and destruction. Although I'm not going to hold my breath for that.
I think the one final thing is to remember the human.
I agree.
Go
for
it. I've often said that. People have said that I'm anti-Russian. I am more pro-Russian than Vladimir Putin. So I don't want to see any of those kids die. I don't want to see another Hamas fighter die. I don't want to see another Israeli soldier die. It's really easy to sit in front of your computer and say, we should kill them all. We should wipe them out. We should just kick them all out of the Gaza Strip. But if you've been in combat, it's a lot harder to understand why people feel that way when you've seen death up close, when you've picked up body parts the size of chicken McNuggets. When you're 48 years old and your best friend is a bottle of liquor, you won't feel so crazy about going after your enemies. So I guess that's my final thought.
Yeah. It always is the civilians who pay the price for this. It's going to be a lot of Palestinian civilians. We're going to see a lot of Israelis die, civilian and otherwise. And it's just a waste because the people who make these decisions are all going to be safe and die of old age, most likely. And that's the real tragedy here, is that, it's going to be a bunch of teenagers and young people who die on both sides, and people who die of preventable diseases because they can't get clean water, medicine, and things like that. Generations of kids growing up in crappy circumstances that aren't going to get any better, that have been now set back 10 years from zero, and back another 10 or 20 years.
There's people in the West Bank right now who they had cancer treatment scheduled. They were supposed to have a colonoscopy, right? There's an excellent guy. His name is Johnny Rogers. He works. He has an NGO that he called Help Is on the Way UA, and he essentially drives around Ukraine in a van. This guy helped someone on the front lines near Bakhmut get dentures. Like, you don't tend to think about the civilians that need dentures in the middle of a war, right? So remember the human. That's my final thought.
Ryan McBeth, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Thank you for checking out this entire episode on YouTube. If you want to follow up on this topic, check out our podcast feed or visit us on our website at jordanharbinger.com, where you can learn more about our guest and dive even deeper into what we discussed today. And remember, YouTube is not the only place that you can check out The Jordan Harbinger Show. Any podcast app should have us. Check out the links in the description where you will find access to our shows that don't appear on YouTube, like Skeptical Sunday, where we debunk topics like crystal healing, GMOs, conspiracy theories, homeopathy, tipping, even lawns, to find out if they're backed by science and logic, or if they're just complete nonsense. Spoiler, many of them are complete nonsense. Also, our Feedback Friday shows where we help people escape from cults, get raises at work, and take all manner of questions from you, the audience, all the way down to the bottom of the barrel. And every episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show has something useful you can take away and apply in your own life and help you navigate what I know can often seem like the overwhelming and paralyzing challenges of modern life. Life can be hard, yes, but we are here to help. And if you appreciate how we help, remember to like, comment, and subscribe.